everybody. Can you raise your hand if it's your first time to the Fungus Fair? Wow, so many people. Welcome, welcome. Can I get a whoop? Awesome. I'm so excited to have Hernan come and visit us from Arizona to tell us about so many wonderful things that he knows about. Mushrooms have so many facets. I think that's the best way to say it. And what's really cool is you can really hone in on something you love, and there's just so many aspects to fungi. So we're here to listen to Hernan talk about the mushrooms of the Southwest, and I hope you guys enjoy.
Thank you guys, and thank you Mycological Society of San Diego for hosting me today. I want to teach you guys about mushrooms of the Southwest, a particular special place in southern Arizona. But these mushrooms that are found there are found all over the world. Maybe all over the world, but definitely all over the U.S. So we have mushrooms from the Southwest, the West Coast, the East Coast, the Midwest, all in that area. It's a very special place. But I wanted to tell you a quick story before I start. I started my company called Desert Alchemist. That's sort of like my alter ego. Started that back in 2015. Reason I got into mushrooms is because my father had suffered 3 strokes. He was paralyzed. He lost movement on half of his body, sensation, and he had memory and speech problems. And at that time, I was studying at the University of Arizona, and I decided to drop out and research stroke recovery. And I ended up finding some studies of a special mushroom that grows everywhere, but also grows in Arizona, that regenerates or stimulates the nervous system into regenerating itself. This mushroom did incredible things. It changed my father's life. It helped him get mobility, memory, sensation, everything back within a year of using this mushroom. So that is the main reason why I got into mushrooms. So that mushroom led me to another and another, and it snowballed from there. So now what I do is I research, I study mushrooms, I forage, I teach people identification classes, and my main hobby right now is trying to find new species, which are very common in the Sky Islands of the Sonoran Desert. So as I mentioned before, these Sky Islands are mountains in Arizona where there are a variety of mushrooms. So we find mushrooms from all over the country in these little mountains. And this is my information in case you guys want to reach out, have questions, if you want to come foraging with me. I make a lot of mushroom videos, and I take people on outings. I'll give you guys a second to get a picture. But I forage all over. I spend a lot of time in California, Northern California and Southern California, my second home. And so most of my time is spent in the forest, looking for mushrooms, trying to find exotic species of mushrooms and rare mushrooms. And I go to these places in southern Arizona that are known as Sky Islands. Sky Islands are basically these mountain ranges that kind of protrude out of the desert. They reach elevations of 9,000 or 10,000 feet. And every step in elevation, there's a different habitat. So at the lowest level, you have the desert, then you have chaparral, riparian habitat, oakland, pinyon, ponderosa, mixed conifer, and aspen at the very top. So you can find every habitat from Arizona to Canada all in one mountain. And each mountain is very different and has different trees and different mushrooms. So with these Sky Islands combined, we have some of the largest diversity of mushrooms in the whole country. And I don't know, you can't see the border here, but right about the middle of the page there, that's the Arizona border. We have a few sky islands in the US, but Mexico has more. And there's lots of species waiting to be discovered in these very special different types of habitat. So, do you guys know what mushrooms are? In case you don't know, mushrooms are the fruiting body of a fungus. They're the spore-bearing fruit that releases the seeds, the genetics, the spores of a fungus. It's basically comparable to the apple of a tree, and the mycelium network would be the tree, and the mushrooms would be the apple of the fungus. The mycelium grows one cell at a time in these little threads, and they spread out in three dimensions in the soil. They branch out into these networks and keep all the plants and organisms connected. Fungi are remarkable organisms. We share 50% of our DNA with mushrooms and fungi, and they are a mixture or a combination of, or sort of like a hybrid between a plant and an animal. They're more closely related to us. They breathe oxygen like we do. They exhale CO2. They're conscious. They basically recycle everything in the forest. They keep the world from getting contaminated because they recycle all the leaf litter, all the trees, anything that needs to decompose. They help decompose it and recycle it, turn it into nutrients, give it back to the soil. So I have a little clip here from Fantastic Fungi, the movie. I'm not sure if it will play, but this is a mycelial network underground. If you had X-ray vision and you could see under the trees, you could see mycelium connecting the trees together and communicating with other mycelium through electrical and chemical signals. Mycelium is very important because it acts like an external root system. And the first plants that came onto land did not have root systems. They had very primitive root-like structures, and they could not survive or adapt to land without the fungus. Fungi colonized land first, and somewhere during that time, fungus said, I'll be your roots. If you give me nutrients, we'll help each other out. And ever since then, more than 80% of our plants in the world have a mycorrhizal symbiotic relationship with a fungus. And so if you can see the roots of this plant here, the roots only go out so far. And roots can't really break down matter. They can't digest other organisms. The mycelium does that. It breaks down organisms. It can extrapolate minerals from the soil, bring it back to the roots of the tree, and it can penetrate much deeper into the earth and reach microscopic crevices. So it can suck water, bring it back to the plant. Without the mycelial networks, plants would not survive on their own. They would dry out. And main reason that they are alive today. The mushrooms are kind of helping life stay afloat in the world. And mushrooms, they start as spores. So we have two spores. When the spores get germinated, they start growing one cell at a time. They become a strand called the hyphae. Those strands of fungal tissue will eventually meet. And when they meet, the DNA from those two strands will combine. It'll make a new genome, and then it'll create this mycelial network. And the mycelium will eventually develop a fruiting body whose purpose is just to release spores and continue the cycle all over again. This image here, this little clip, is a puffball. Water droplets are falling on it, and it's releasing spores into the air. most mushrooms have structures that can help them release their spores. So a lot of mushrooms, not all of them have these features, but most of them have a cap, a stem. Some of them have a veil, some of them have a vulva, but they all have this mycelial network that goes underground and is very extensive. And mushrooms have different structures for reproducing or releasing spores. They can have gills that are like clear-cut sheets of paper, very straight, very thin. They can have these ridges that look like forking veins that are just shallow, thick, false gills. They have teeth or pores, and then they have different arrangements or styles of gill formation, so they can be decurrent, they can be free from the stem. And they also make interesting structures. So we'll talk about these two in a little bit, but there's mushrooms like the one on the left that melt, and there's mushrooms like the one on the right that sweat, and they release medicinal compounds when they do this. So have you guys been foraging? No, yeah, a little bit? So I'll give you guys a tip. If you want to know where there are mushrooms, usually if it's dry, sometimes it's pretty dry here in San Diego, mushrooms are going to be found at usually higher elevations, but if you get the coastal rains here, you can find them in people's yards. And usually they like to be close to water. If they're in a ravine or a canyon where there's less exposure to sunlight, more humidity can collect, then they'll be growing there. And northern slopes are probably the best place to find them when it's dry. They also like to grow on dead trees. Any tree that's sick or dying, you're pretty much going to find some sort of fungus growing on it. So if you look around in the forest, the best places to look are stumps, fallen logs. If you see a sick tree and it's the right season, there's a lot of rain, if you go to the base of that tree, you're most likely going to find mushrooms. And we have some etiquette for foraging. Not everybody follows this. It's not really like enforced, but I like to teach people about foraging. I teach people not to take more than what they need, to respect the mushroom cycle. Take only the mature specimens, leave the little ones behind, unless you really have to take the little ones. And usually take half or 1/3 of what you find. These mushrooms are important not only for other animals and other people, but when they break down, they decompose, they become nutrients that feed the plants. So it's very important. And a lot of people will respect these rules and they'll respect wildlife. And then one of my most important rules is to leave the forest better than it was before you got there. So if there's trash there, pick it up, take it out. People ask me all the time, what's a good application for identifying mushrooms? I like to go with iNaturalist. This is a scientific application platform that scientists all over the world use. And the application itself has an algorithm that can identify mushrooms at, I would say, maybe like a 70% success rate. If it gets it wrong, however, me or one of my peers will go on there, we'll fix it for you, and you'll know by the end of the week exactly what species you found. And if you want to learn how to get free sequencing done on a mushroom, if you find something that looks new, nobody's seen before, I can help you with that. We can talk about that after the class, but there's ways to do this. But I can actually go over it real quick. So you find a mushroom that's super cool, you take it, you dry the specimen, and then you make sure that you take pictures of the specimen in the location you found it. Save those pictures, upload them to iNaturalist, and then break off a piece of that mushroom, just the size of a grain of rice, put it in a Ziploc with the INAT number, because INAT will give you a number that will identify your specific post, and then mail it into Mycology, and they will do the sequencing for you. They'll upload the DNA to your INAT, and you might find something interesting. So, a lot of the mushrooms that we can find in the Southwest, this is one of the most common ones found in conifers, known as the red-belted polypore. I live in Tucson. There's a mountain there called Mount Lemon, and this is probably like the most prevalent polypore that grows up there. It does have medicinal properties, but it's a really cool mushroom, fairly easy to identify. It's a shell-shaped conch that grows on the pine trees. It has no stems. It has this nice red band across the edge, and then the top is very sticky and sappy. And you can find different species of these even out here in Southern California. They might have different names, but they all relatively look very similar. Something really cool that was just discovered this last summer in Arizona was agarikon. So, you guys know about agarikon? Oh, it's a very popular mushroom. It went extinct in Europe because in the early 19th century, people were harvesting it to treat tuberculosis, so they went nuts and they cut them all off and basically had run out of these mushrooms in Europe. They're making a comeback now, but these mushrooms take hundreds of years to grow, and they have some of the most powerful natural antiviral compounds. So they're very medicinal. They're a powerhouse of medicinal compounds, but they also grow very slowly and are endangered. We found one in Arizona this summer on Mount Graham. So we're pretty excited because the only places where you find these are the Pacific Northwest and maybe Northern California and Siberia. So to find this mushroom in some of the driest parts of the country was pretty impressive, and I'm sure you guys might have it out here somewhere up in the mountains. And so these are polypores that grow, and they have these rings, they have these columns, they grow in a columnar shape, and they have a nice, usually gray color. Reishi, you guys have reishi out here. We just found it yesterday in one of the forays in the mountains. The first original reishi was known as the queen of medicinal mushrooms. It was found in China, and it was known as the mushroom of immortality, the mushroom of 10,000 years. I think it was the first Chinese emperor had found it or discovered it, and he used it in his elixir of immortality. So he tried to make an elixir that would supposedly make people immortal, sent emissaries across the world to find rare herbs and mushrooms, and somehow this mushroom got on that list, and it's been used in traditional Chinese medicine ever since. It's a powerhouse of medicinal content. So it's got a lot of beta glucans, terpenes, a lot of good fungal sugars, and can help naturally lower bad cholesterol. But it's found all over the Southwest, and we have different species. We have the golden reishi, we have Ganoderma lobatum, Ganoderma sessile. We have over 7 species in Arizona, and I think you guys have more here in Southern California. Another common bracket fungus is the horseshoe bracket, or Messima. These guys are found on basically every kind of tree. They've even been found in cacti. But they have these features that set them apart from other mushrooms. They kind of look like they're part of the tree, and they have this cracked top with a velvety underside. And they like to grow on pines. They like to grow on oaks. We have these here. We saw some yesterday during our foray. And they're also good for your immune system. Fungus? I've heard that name before. I'm not sure exactly which genus of mushrooms that is, but I've heard of it. The most famous one, though, is turkey tail, and there's a big log in the identification table over there that has turkey tail. It's an easy to identify mushroom, very small, flat, thin shell shape with lots of bands, lots of color, lots of felt-like texture on the top. And when you flip it over, it's got nice visible pores. These mushrooms are very famous because they enhance the immune system. They can help you go from 0 to 100. If you had just gone over radiation or chemotherapy and your immune system is shot, these mushrooms, make a tea with it and drink it every day. Within 2 to 3 weeks, you can see your immune system kind of regenerate itself and get better. But these are found all over the Southwest. And they're very easy, but they do have a couple lookalikes. I don't think I put some of the lookalikes here, but the lookalikes don't have colorful bands. They have bands, but they're different shades of the same color. One of the coolest mushrooms that we see is the sawgill. You probably can't see that from here, but if you were to look closely at these gills of this mushroom, they're serrated like a saw. And this is a mushroom that we see often in the Southwest. It's growing, it comes before all the other mushrooms come. Even when it's still dry, it's like July or June, the rains haven't came, these guys start popping out of the wood. They are massive. They're basically cousins of the shiitake on steroids, and they can get like dinner plate size, and they have this nice thick rubbery flesh with really good flavor. So when you see these guys popping up, it means like 2 or 3 weeks later, all the other mushrooms are going to come in. So it's the indicator of the mushroom season. And during the mushroom season, one of the most common mushrooms that you'll find are the slippery jacks, which come in different shapes and colors. But they all have yellow undersides. So if you flip them over, they have these pores under the cap. So no gills. They have pores. They have a thin, short stems. Sometimes the stem is a little bit longer. The cap could be, brown like the one on the right, or yellow. They come in different colors, but the underside is always going to be that bright buttery yellow. This is also known as the chicken fat fungus. And it's a good edible mushroom. There's no poisonous, sweetless mushrooms. So if you find one of these in the forest, you can eat them. Just make sure you don't pick them off of somebody's lawn or something, because people spray chemicals on their lawn. And the second most common mushroom in the forest is the rusula. And rusula mushrooms are known as brittle gills. They have simple characteristics. So if you look at the mushroom, they have a nice white chalky looking stem. The cap is always going to be one solid color, just either green, purple, red, yellow, white, everything but blue. And these mushrooms have very soft tissue, so if you were to rub the gills with your fingers, the gills break off very easily. If you try to bend the stem even a little bit, it just pops like a piece of chalk. That is due to the fact that they have these round-shaped cells that don't stay together very well. Their cell structure is very weak, so they break very easily. You have those here, and we have a type of rusula that looks, it's the same species, but these guys are toxic. And the way to tell them from the edible ones is they usually will be growing under oaks. So if you go look under the oaks, you might see a rusula. If you bite into it and chew that little piece for 30 seconds, it's going to light up your mouth like a jalapeno pepper. And it's not edible. Some people still eat them anyways. I've heard that you can cook them really well and get rid of that toxin. But if you do eat them and you don't cook them very well, they'll make you throw up. So they're known as like the vomiter rusulas. And they always come in this red color. And Last year, I found one that was not red. It was like yellow. And I bit into it, and it was the same spicy flavor. So we're going to figure out what species that is this year. Do you guys have lobsters here? No. In Southern California? No? So lobster mushrooms are a type of Russula. So same mushroom. One of these, well, the white version of this. You can see it here on the left. There's the white Russula. So what happens to this mushroom is a fungus called Hypomyces lactiflorum comes, infects it, takes over the body, turns it into this bright orange color, gets rid of the gills, just hijacks the fruiting body, and makes a new mushroom called the lobster mushroom. And when it releases spores, it's not releasing the Russula spores, it's releasing the Hypomyces DNA. So it kind of hijacks the fruiting body. I don't know why it was too lazy to make its own fruiting body, but that's what it does. And they're great mushrooms. So they are a nice red or orange color on the outside. Slice them open. The inside is white like a lobster. One of my top 3 favorites in the world. And closely related to the Russulas are the milk caps. And these guys come in different colors. The candy caps that grow in, I guess, Central California, like Santa Cruz, they're related to these guys. Those are mushrooms that lactate. So when you slice them or when they get broken, a little latex comes out that looks like often like milk. And it could be yellow, white, red, or orange, or in this case, it would be blue milk. These guys are a little bit rare where I come from. I only find them 1 week out of the year, and if you're not there during that week, during the right day, they will decompose and go away. But lactarius mushrooms have depression in the center of the cap, so a little hole on the top, and they have this bullseye pattern. And sometimes they don't have that bullseye pattern, but they have the depression. And we have a candy cap here in San Diego known as a Southern candy cap that smells very sweet and doesn't taste as, I guess, great as the regular candy cap, but it's still pretty good. I've eaten it in the past. Now we're gonna get into the boletes. So these are really famous mushrooms. People that go mushroom picking, they're always looking for boletes. So boletes are also known as porcini mushrooms. Porcini means little pig. The Italians named them little pigs because they have, little fat stems, very girthy bodies. And this guy here is actually going to be our state mushroom in Arizona. We've nominated this to become the state mushroom. You guys have the chanterelle, the kind of California chanterelle. So we have this one. It's nominated to be our state mushroom. If you want to support after the class, I'll give you a QR code to sign a petition. But boletes have these reticulation. If you look at the stem, you probably can't see it, but if you look closely at the stem, you can see this like hexagonal kind of web-like pattern. Very common in boletes, and you flip them over, they have pores on the underside. These pores they start out white, but then they mature into a nice yellow color or sometimes green. And boletes come in many different colors and styles. So we have the ruby bolete. This is very common in the Southwest. I'm not sure if you guys have those here. No? You guys have Queen? Barosia, okay. So that white king bolete, this also grows here. And in Northern California, we have the queen bolete. But boletes are very cool. They come in lots of different species, and the Sky Islands of Arizona have probably the largest varieties of boletes. That's what we're finding new species of every year, is a new type of bolete. They just kind of pop up randomly. Some of them are toxic, like the Satan's bolete, which you have just a little bit further north of here. Satan's bolete, it's a bolete that has red pores and a red stem. And then you have the bitter boletes, like the one on the right that has a nice reddening stem. You slice them open, they turn bright blue immediately. This is Satan's bolete. So this also, this bolete also stains blue. So you slice it open, it turns bright blue right away. Those red colors are sort of like a warning sign, but you can't apply this to every mushroom because every mushroom is different. The deadliest mushrooms in the world are white, just white mushrooms. But Satan's bolete is a beautiful mushroom. It looks, very girthy, a lot of meat there. But if you ate the Satan's bolete, it would give you severe gastrointestinal distress for a week or so. So you wouldn't want to eat it. But it's a beautiful mushroom nonetheless, and it has these warning signs on the underside. The red colors should tell you to stay away. These boletes come in many different shapes. So we have candy apple boletes, we have butter boletes, you have the handsome bolete in the middle, Russell's bolete. Most boletes are pretty safe, but when you're out there picking mushrooms, make sure you do research. Make sure you contact somebody that knows mushrooms very well, an expert in the area that can tell you whether they're edible. But these are varieties that we find in Arizona, and there's like, I don't know, another 10 more I could put up there that grow. And most of them are edible. So like this candy apple bolete on the left, it's a pretty cool mushroom. It's got interesting flavor. And we also have aspen boletes. Do you guys have these here? No? So these guys like to grow by the aspen. It's not really a bolete, although it has similar characteristics. So if you look at the cap, it's got that big broad cap that looks like a burger bun. You flip it over and it's got white pores on the underside, but the stem is really skinny. It's very long and skinny. It's not girthy like the other boletes, and it's dotted with these scabers. So it's known as a scaber stalk. And it's a really good edible that you can find in the mountains. And when you slice it open, it turns black. It turns blue and then it turns black. Kind of scary, but it's a pretty safe mushroom. Only rarely somebody will get sick from eating them, but this is because some people are just not built to handle certain mushrooms. Like my photographer, if he ate a rusula, any kind of rusula that's edible that everybody else can eat, he gets super sick, like for a whole week. He gets super ill, but if he eats a lobster mushroom, he's fine. So it's just some people can't handle certain mushrooms. And if you're gonna cook a mushroom from the wild, I recommend just taking a little piece, cook it, eat a small piece, and then wait about an hour. And if you're okay after that, then you're able to eat the whole rest of the mushroom. But you never know. I could eat a mushroom that everybody eats tomorrow, and maybe my body just doesn't agree with it. You guys know this guy, right? The fly agaric, the most iconic mushroom in the world. So it's known as the Alice in Wonderland mushroom, the Mario Brothers mushroom. Tribes in Siberia use this mushroom. They feed it to reindeer. And then they drink the reindeer urine, or they drink the milk from the reindeer. And they have these rituals, shamanic rituals, usually done during the winter solstice. So it is a entheogen, technically, but if you eat these raw, they can make you sick. They can hurt your liver. So people process them through decarboxylation. So they basically put them under a lot of heat, 260 degrees Fahrenheit. They kind of heat them up, and then they use them afterwards. Not recommended because it's a complicated process, and they can make you sick. So most people don't eat them. But the only people that will try to eat them, what they would do is they take them and they boil them. Boil them twice, and then you take the mushroom and then you can cook it and eat it. But this is the Amanita genus. So Amanitas have the features that I showed you guys in the first slide. They have a broad cap. most of the time they have a skirt too under the cap, but some of them don't. And they usually hatch out of a little egg. So that egg is known as a universal veil. When, depending on the species of Amanita, the way that they grow, sometimes the egg breaks up into a million pieces and stays on the cap, like it does on this Amanita. Or sometimes it stays intact and nothing comes off. It just stays as an egg form and grows like this grisette. So this Amanita here is an edible species. It's known as a grisette, and it's easy to ID because it has these long, slender stems with no ring on the stem, and the cap has these striations, so these little stripes on the margin. No warts on top. One of the most popular edible Amanitas, which you probably don't have here, no? This is Caesar's Amanita, or our Arizona variant is the Amanita cochiciana. It's an edible Amanita that has a bright, like fruity, uplifting flavor, and it hatches out of out of a little egg sac, and it's one of the most beautiful Amanitas you can find. Very iconic, like the Muscaria, and it just has a solid color cap, orange color with no warts. Maybe sometimes a little piece of the universal veil will stay on the cap, but for the most part it's smooth, and it's got orange skirt, yellow stem, and yellow gills. So the one, we have lots of species. There's a species here in Southern California known as the springtime Amanita, Amanita villosa. It kind of looks very similar to the one on the right here. It's got a nice salmon pinkish color, and it has a straight stem, straight stalk. If you rip off the egg, there's no bulbous base, it's just kind of straight. Edible mushroom that should be popping up here in the next week. And there's also toxic Amanitas. So there's edible Amanitas, but there's poisonous Amanitas, and you guys have a lot of toxic Amanitas here. You guys have the destroying angels. You guys have death caps growing under the oaks. So a lot of people avoid Amanitas just because the most toxic mushrooms in the world are in that family. So when people see Amanitas, they just don't want to mess with them. They leave them alone. But there's destroying angels. The one on the left here is one that was found in Mount Lemmon. I found it 2 years ago, and it was the first time it was found this far west of the United States. It's the northeastern destroying angel. And there's lots of species that are popping up over there. There's parts of these Sky Islands that are very similar to the San Diego ecosystem, and we have a lot of oaks where we get lots of different species of Amanitas. One of the coolest mushrooms that you can find out here is a chanterelle, and you guys get those here, right? Yeah? So the chanterelles are the big ones. So yeah, you guys have that big, beautiful chanterelles. I don't know if anybody found any this weekend, but these mushrooms are cool. They have a very cool fruity smell. So when you smell them, they smell like apricots. They smell very sweet. And when you cut them open, they have this white inner tissue. They are one of the most expensive mushrooms in the market, and they're known for their characteristics, which are this trumpet shape that it forms when they grow. They form this little trumpet shape cap, and they have these ridges, these little false gills that run down the stem. And once they get bigger, they get older, they kind of flare out and they kind of look weird, but you can still identify them from their smell. But there is lookalikes. There are lookalikes. So we have the false chanterelle. I found that in California as well. And they look very similar, but the false chanterelle feels lighter when you touch it. It's not thick and solid tissue. When you slice it open, it's orange on the inside instead of white. And sometimes they can have a fruity smell, so it can be a little bit tricky. Another cool mushroom that you guys have here, and we have a variety of the one that you guys have, is the jack-o'-lantern. These are mushrooms that glow at night. They have natural bioluminescence. So if you take them to a place that's very dark, they will glow, and you can see it with the naked eye. You just have to wait for your eyes to adjust, and you can see them glowing. You can capture the glow with a camera, and a lot of people confuse these with chanterelles. They kind of look very similar. You can see that trumpet shape that looks very similar to the chanterelle, and they like to grow, except for these guys like to grow on their oaks. And their gills are different. These guys have actual real gills, so they're not like those thick ridges. They're actual gills. They do run down the stem, but often these are mistaken for chanterelles, and these guys are poisonous, so they can make you sick if you eat them. So you gotta be careful when you're out there hunting. But this is one of my favorites because of that glow. It's one of the most coolest mushrooms that you can find out here. And there is one on the table, the ID table. So after the class, I'm gonna see if we can maybe capture the glow somewhere. We'll take it somewhere dark and see if I could show you guys the glow. We have honey mushrooms. Do you guys have those here? Yeah? So honey mushrooms are pretty cool. They smell very sweet. They have a cap that's peppered with little scabers. It kind of looks like somebody peppered it. They have a stem with a lot of striation, a lot of stripes, fibers going down the stem. Often they will, when the cap breaks open, it leaves a little ring, and sometimes it doesn't. But they grow in clusters. So when you find these guys, there are usually like 12 or more mushrooms growing in a cluster. Very good edibles. I find them better than the chanterelle. So people in France will pay like $200 for a nice chanterelle dinner, and I like these better. They have a better flavor. I don't know, they're underrated. They have a fatty, nice umami, mushroomy flavor, and they also have a look-alike, but sort of. I don't think these are. I wouldn't confuse this with a honey mushroom, but some people would, just because they both have, you know, that ring, and they have sort of similar looking stems with stripes. But the Gallerina, the funeral bell, is a mushroom that grows solitary most of the time by itself, and they're small. These mushrooms are toxic. To me, they don't look like the honey mushroom, but some people get them confused, so I wanted to share the lookalikes here. You have the parasols. These are beautiful mushrooms. They can get, you know, this big, tall, edible. They grow in the foothills of some of these sky islands, and they're edible mushrooms. They're called macrolepiodas, giant parasols. Very little is known about these mushrooms. For some reason, nobody has sequenced these mushrooms here in the United States. They just call them parasols, and we don't have any species to compare them to other than the ones that are in Europe. So what I did this year is I took some of these guys and I sent the DNA to the lab so that we can get some sort of idea and figure out what the heck these guys are. They also have lookalikes. These guys are grown, they're found in grass. So if you go to the parks, sometimes you'll find these guys. They look like the parasol, but they're a lot shorter. They're smaller. And if you look closely at the gills, they have a little greenish hue. So when you cut the cap off and you put it on a piece of paper or on the table, it'll drop bright green spores. These guys are toxic. Don't let your dogs eat them. If you're out in the parks, your dogs may try to eat them. They can make you very sick. They can make you throw up. So we try to avoid picking those, especially any mushroom that grows in a park, because a lot of times they spray parks with stuff. Now one of my favorite mushrooms out in the whole world is matsutake, and we have the Mexican matsutake in Arizona, you guys have a couple different species here, right?
Yeah, more in Northern California.
Northern California. You guys don't have it here? So matsutake, people in Japan, they pay thousands of, not dollars, the Japanese currency, their yen, right? So they pay a lot of money for these guys, and these mushrooms smell like cinnamon. They have like a mixture of cinnamon and dirty socks. It's a weird smell, but they're really beautiful, and they have these gills that have a notch right before they connect to the stem. There's a little notch, a little gap between the stem, and then when you look at the stem, it has these little, like, I call them stretch marks, but they're like orange stripes that go down the stem, and then it tapers. And often you can find these mushrooms with the cap fully closed. It has this tissue that closes the cap, and it looks like it's wrapped inside of a sock. And these are some of the best mushrooms in the world. If you cook them the way the Japanese do, with the ginger and soy sauce, they can taste really, really good. Shaggy mane, these are mushrooms that melt. So these guys, what they do is they release an enzyme, basically, that breaks down fungal tissue. So they start digesting themselves and they start melting. So when you pick them, if you pick them at a late state like that, and if you don't get them home within an hour, they'll just turn into black ink, and it'll melt in your basket. But they're great edibles, and they're easy to identify because they have this, conical or cylindrical shaped shaggy cap. They have very, very thin, delicate tissue on the stem. So if you try to pinch the stem, it just collapses and snaps. And they have somewhat of a look-alike that grows in the desert, known as the desert shaggy mane. There's some of these in the table over here. These guys are actually puffballs. They're not related to the shaggy mane at all. They're a totally different kind of mushroom. They have no gills. They don't melt. They just kind of mature, and the insides dry out, and when you kick them, they release millions of spores. There are different species of these. This guy here is actually a new species that I found maybe 3 years ago, and it was about this long. So we're gonna get it described and get it named. I think I would like to name it Podaxis colossus, and ignore that name, that scientific name, and that was a typo. So puffballs are a type of mushroom that they don't have gills. They don't have pores. They don't have teeth. They just kind of rot on the inside or mature, and the inside gets dry, and then it will create a little pore at the top of the cap where the spores will come out of. So when they get kicked or when it rains, spores shoot out of these. And there are poisonous puffballs like the earth skin or earth balls or the pig skin puffballs that have very thick tissue. Most puffballs are edible if you slice them open and they're white all the way through, like the one here on the bottom right. They're gonna be pretty safe. You can just cook them. Some people really, really like these guys. If you slice it open and it's black, that means it's one of the toxic ones. And just avoid them. No harm in touching poisonous mushrooms. You can even chew a little piece if you want and spit it out, and nothing would happen. So there's no harm in touching them. Just don't eat the poisonous kinds. But these puffballs get really big. They can get massive, and sometimes they fuse together and they have funny shapes. We have the giant western puffball in southern Arizona, and they can get beach ball size. When you slice them open, that tissue inside is just white, and people make pizza crust with the slice, and they use it for cooking. But puffballs, this particular type of puffball doesn't have flavor, so it's kind of like the tofu of mushrooms. So you have to cook it the way you want it, and you can make it taste pretty good, but It's a lot of tissue. So the one here on the left, I think I only got through about a quarter, and then I couldn't finish the rest. I had to dry it out or share it with people. Now we have oyster mushrooms. You guys have these here. We found some yesterday. Simple, easy to identify. There are no poisonous lookalikes here in the Southwest. The oyster mushrooms have shelf-like structures. They usually grow in little clusters or that look like shelves. They have gills that run from the tip of the cap all the way down to the bottom of the stem. Some of them have stems, some of them don't. For the most part, the common edible ones, like the summer oyster, Pleurotus austriatus, has a little bit of a false stem, but usually they're just found growing directly off the tree. And they have a nice almondy smell. There are no poisonous lookalikes of these here in Southern California, but if you go further north, you find these little guys known as destroying angels that look similar, but they're smaller, white, and a little bit more translucent. And they say that they're poisonous. Angel wings, yeah, sorry. Angel wings. There's debate whether they're poisonous or not. I think some people in Japan had there were some incidences where some people got poisoned, but they couldn't really directly link it back to that mushroom. So some people eat them. I know people that have tried them. I would personally avoid trying that as a beginner. I would just go for the regular oysters. And there's mushrooms that have these icicle formations, these teeth that grow. They grow in this like globular shape, and then they develop these teeth. Lion's mane, you guys have this here, right? So lion's mane, it grows on oaks. It likes to grow on oaks most of the time. And you can't confuse this with anything else because there's no lookalikes to this mushroom. If you see this growing on the tree and it's got those icicle teeth, that's what it is. It's a lion's mane. Pretty safe mushroom to consume. You can take it, cook it. People make these into crab cakes. They have a nice mushroomy scent, and they have some compounds in them that can help with neurological disorders, epilepsy, dementia, but they're heat sensitive. So if you cook them, you destroy these compounds. So what you want to do is do some sort of cold extraction or freeze dry them and eat them that way. Then you get all the benefits. These lion's mane have lookalikes, or not lookalikes, relatives. So we have the coral tooth. I think out here you guys also have bear's head, which is a very similar lookalike to lion's mane. Same family and same taste, same compounds, but they grow in this coral shape. They grow these little arms, little branches that have teeth and are also really great, but I've never found any that are bigger than this. But the lion's mane can get basketball size. And there's pheasant back mushrooms. I don't know if you guys have these here.
I found a few that are really rare.
Yeah? Yeah, so same thing in the Southwest. If you get a lot of rain, we'll get these. They're really good edibles too. They are simple to ID. They have this pheasant feather-like pattern on the cap, and the underside is porous, and sort of it sort of has this tapering stem from the cap. Not very common. I've only seen this once out in nature. But what we do have is chicken of the woods, and I know you guys have this here because we found it a few times. These guys grow in shelves. They like to grow on, well, where I come from, they grow on cottonwoods. Here, I think they grow in eucalyptus.
Yeah, and black oaks in the mountains.
Yes. So the ones on eucalyptus, I've heard that they can be toxic. So I've never tried to eat them. I don't know if you guys have eaten the eucalyptus species.
There's 25% of the population are allergic to this species of mushrooms.
In general, right?
And,
So
and then it could be oak or eucalyptus. So some people eat them on eucalyptus no problem, and other people eat them on oaks with problems. So they're kind of questionable. And you have to get them really young, because they tend to get
They tend to get
old
like,
and sour. They'll kind of get hard to digest and leathery.
yeah,
You
so.
gotta get them really tender and cook the crap out of them.
Yeah, so chicken of the woods, I have this bright yellow sulfur colored pores on the underside, orange color on the cap. When you rip the meat open, it kind of tears like chicken meat. It peels apart. And they are questionable. Some people can't eat these at all. Most people can, but some people will get sick no matter where it's growing or what tree it's growing on. This happened to one of my friends last year at Telluride Mushroom Festival. We all had this mushroom dinner. We ate all kinds of mushrooms, and one of the things that we all ate was fried chicken of the woods. We all ate it. Only one person got really sick, and he was throwing up the entire night, and we had to take him to the hospital. So be careful with chicken of the woods. It's commonly known as an edible, but some people can't handle it. And one of the best mushrooms, I think most people would agree that this is like the best mushroom on the planet. Morels. We have like 7 to 10 different species in Arizona. You guys have them here. They grow here during the winter rains, usually like December, January, February. You can find these growing on your lawn, but you guys have different species here. Where I come from, we get these in April when we get the winter or the spring rains, or when the winter snow melts. We'll see these guys popping up in different elevations. We have to kind of climb high up to see these, and they come in different colors. So you have the black ones, fire morels. These guys will grow when there's been a burn, so maybe Los Angeles will get some of these this year. But they like to grow out of they like the minerals that are released from the burnt trees, the ashes. It feeds these mushrooms. They're opportunistic, so they will grow if they can, when they need to, and when there's resources, they'll pop up. And these guys are hollow, and they taste like a steak dinner when you cook them. They have a meaty flavor, so people love to find morels. And you can't grow these in a lab, at least not yet. So you can only find them in the wild, and it has to be during specific time of the year. They're kind of finicky about when they like to grow. Do you have a question? Or okay. And let me know if you have any questions anytime. I will answer them. And we have different species, so they can be very small, and they like to grow on different substrates. So some of them will grow on oaks, some of them will grow on mulch. The mulch morel is very common here. I didn't find one this season, but I'm sure they're still out there. The San Diego University has a lot of these on their campus. I just walk around and I find little gold ones laying around or growing on the floor.
There were some growing in that building what's that building called? The botanical building? Yeah, there's some growing in that botanical building.
Yeah, so I heard that was like recently, right? Yeah, you guys had these morels growing there. I heard they got really big gold ones. No? But so people think this is the best mushroom in the world, but my opinion is that this guy is the best mushroom in the world. It's called the cauliflower mushroom, and it grows like a brain. It just looks like a brain on the forest floor, and they get pretty big. They can get massive. I don't think I took other pictures of this, but these mushrooms have a lot of flavor, and you can smell them. You can tell how much flavor they have just by smelling it. When you get close up to it, they have like a smell of a lot of spices. That kind of reminds me of chicken cup of noodles. When you open the cup, it has that smell of all the spices in there, and it's got a lot of meat and delicate texture, kind of like stroganoff noodles. They make excellent mushrooms for cooking, but they only grow very sparsely. They only grow, one at a time, and so usually I only find 1, maybe 3 of these total in 1 year, and you have to do a lot of hiking, climbing steep terrain to get to some of these. What species is the one that you guys have here? Do you know?
We don't get that.
You don't get that one?
No.
I thought you guys did.
Fir trees north and Northern California.
Oh, I see.
We're basically.
I don't know if you guys have this here, but this is known as a zombie fungus. It's a fungus that parasitizes insects. It takes over their brains and it makes them go places where it wants them to go. That's usually gonna be like right into the ant hill or another place where they can infect other insects. And these guys grow and in the soil. They spent 90% of their lifetime as a mold, in a mold state. They live in the soil or they live inside the leaves of plants. And when the insects eat these plants, the fungus gets into their system, takes over their brains, and then mummifies them, and the mushrooms grow out of their body. They are technically edibles, but they're usually very tiny. They're hard to find. We did a workshop a couple days ago, cultivation of cordyceps, and people got to take home their kits. You can grow these in a lab now, and they can grow large amounts of these without having to go forage them. But I don't know if you guys have those in California. It might be.
I've seen them in Veracruz.
Yeah, they might be rare finds. I was surprised to find these in the Southwest because it's pretty dry there in southern Arizona, but we found one species called Cordyceps mexicana. It's the same species that grows down in Mexico, down in Oaxaca, all the way down to South America. One of the coolest mushrooms that we have, though, is the one on my t-shirt. This is Psilocybe aztecorum. It is a mushroom that can be found from Canada all the way down to South America. And it's a psychedelic mushroom, one of the few species that we get in the Southwest. It is a very tiny, basically gold cap. They are very thin in the Southwest, but here in California, you guys have you have like 10 different species of psilocybe. There's one growing right outside here. And these are the magic mushrooms. So you take these mushrooms, you eat them. If you eat enough of them, you'll have a psychedelic experience, spiritual journey. And there's lots of different species. Some of them are not even in the same family. So there's Peliculosa, there's Hopii. Here in California, you have the wavy caps, you have the flying saucers, you have the ovoids, like the ones that are growing out here. And these mushrooms are kind of tricky. They're kind of hard to identify. They're small mushrooms, and they have these gills that have a purplish tint most of the time. If you cut the head off, you put them on a piece of paper, they'll drop these purple black colored spores. And they are commonly found in super wet areas. Here in California, you can find them on mulch. That's going to be the easiest place to find them. San Diego Zoo has a couple species that grow in certain parts of the zoo. And another psychedelic that is often found in a lot of places is the laughing gem. So laughing gem is a different species, or sorry, a totally different genus of mushrooms, not related to psilocybe, but they also contain psilocybin, and these guys like to grow on mulch. I think they grow here as well. They just grow on people's planters. They have these yellow gills. They drop a rusty, bright orange spore print when you cut the cap off. But these are some of the coolest mushrooms that we have. And psychedelic mushrooms can grow in different genuses. So there's fiber caps that are psychedelic. There's gyms. There's the psilocybes. A lot of people like to learn about these guys. And Alan Rockefeller is one of the experts on psychedelic mushrooms and psilocybe species. But if you guys are interested in seeing these mushrooms, going foraging, I lead classes every summer. If you happen to come to Arizona, if you want to go foraging, let me know. And it usually takes place during July through September. I can take you guys to different places and see lots of different mushrooms, a lot of diversity. You can at least see 50 or more species in one day. And if I come to San Diego or any part of California, we lead tours as well. So if you want information on that, go to our meetup group. And thank you for coming. Questions?
You talk a lot about how some mushrooms cause can make you sick and stuff. Is there really no other way than tasting a bit of it to find out?
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to tell. There's unless you know exactly what species they are, and yeah, if you can look it up, then the only way to do it is basically by cooking a little bit and trying that to see if you're one of the people that are sensitive. A lot of people want to eat mushrooms because it's exciting. You find these mushrooms and you want to eat them. Some people will eat them on the spot, and if you get lucky, you won't get sick, but you always want to consult with an expert or a forager.
Can you, back to his question, can you positively identify a mushroom? I mean, you're out in the field, you want to eat it, but you need a quick way to know, right? And I guess if you're an expert or you bring an expert with you, you can do that. But
Yeah, you can do it on the spot. If you don't know what the mushroom is, unfortunately, you're gonna have to bring it back and then look it up. iNat can tell you what it is, the iNaturalist app, but like I said, sometimes it gets it wrong. And you don't want to go based off of what it tells you until about, give it a few days, have some experts go on there and look at it, and they can confirm it for you. Or if you eat it, you're taking the risk of maybe getting sick, or maybe not.
are there levels of toxicity? I mean, one can make you, flatulence, discomfort of the stomach.
Yes.
Can one kill you?
Yeah, there's a lot of different toxins in mushrooms demystified. David Aurora has a whole thing in the back of all the different toxins and the symptoms you get and whatnot. And that taste and spit technique is really good for the spicy russelas, but for instance, the deadly amanitas taste good. There's no bitter. So the worst ones actually don't taste bad. Calorinas and amanitas they don't have that spicy. That's just for the spicy ones that'll change your stomach.
Yeah.
Which those won't even kill you. So the worst ones don't taste bad. So that's doesn't work. So there's a lot of toxins. It's very in depth, but that book breaks it all down with all the different toxic mushrooms and what they do to you. So yeah, there's quite a few different mushroom toxins.
Yeah, and people confuse the deadly ones for other mushrooms, particularly like people from like Vietnam. They pick them, and sometimes they get sick because they think it's something that grows in their country. Yeah, they die.
No, that's what I was going to say.
They have daddy straws look just like the deadly amanitas. They almost look identical. So they like, oh, I've seen that one. And they think, oh, it's the same one, but it's not. And they don't taste bad. And then it's like
So like the deadly amanitas, the toxic ones, you'll die. It's sort of like a slow death. You get really sick. You get really sick for a week, and then you start getting better, and you're like, oh, I'm getting over this, and then you die. What amanita does is
liver failure.
Yeah, it destroys your liver. It stops you from being able to make proteins in your body. And so even in some cases when people get a liver transplant, they still die, even after that. So it's a very dangerous mushroom, and it's not very common where I come from, but here it's like everywhere on all the oaks. So learn your mushrooms well. And I guess a good rule would be for you guys is to study the Amanita family very well so that you're familiar with them, and maybe avoid Amanitas in general. If you just play it safe. But I would say maybe like 10% of the world's mushrooms are like super poisonous. The rest are gonna be either mildly poisonous or not poisonous at all. It's just a very small percentage of super deadly ones. It only takes one.
You guys are finding American enough now around?
Yeah.
Do you have any more hopes that you'll find more, or?
We're gonna go this year. I'm gonna go. I went a couple weeks ago, but then it started snowing.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go up there this summer. If there's one, there's gotta be more.
Yeah.
And I actually thought it grew a few years ago, maybe like 7 years ago. I thought it would grow up there, and I spent a lot of time going to different mountains, and I couldn't find it. And then I traveled to Oregon, and even there I couldn't find it. I found it in Northern California. So the conditions where I found it growing were really, really wet. What do you call it? Pine forest, super wet. And I was like, okay, then that's never gonna grow in Arizona because it's pretty dry there. We get rain, but it's never gonna be that wet for that amount of time. So it was really surprising to have found that growing there. And I believe where it's growing, there's gotta be more because we have these super giant Douglas fir trees that are, ancient trees, and that mountain has the most amount of those there. So we might be able to find more.
How often do you conduct the foraging classes, and when do you do it out here?
When I do it out here, I will probably do it with the group. We did one yesterday, but if I do it independently, I will post it on my social media or my meetup group. I'll schedule a class ahead of time, with a week's notice, so that people can sign up and we can just go explore for mushrooms. So one of my favorite places to go is Los Peñasquitos Canyon Preserve. It's pretty close. There's mushrooms there. There's some edible amanitas, but there's also deadly amanitas there. So you got to learn them. You have to learn them, and going with somebody, seeing it in person, having people show you the features can help you kind of narrow it down so that you don't mistake it for something deadly.
What kind of mushrooms were discovered at the foray yesterday?
They're all out there, on the tables.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was.
101. Across the Eden going?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
Parking
Better,
horrible.
There was not a whole lot, but there was some cool stuff.
For being such a dry area.
Jack-o'-lanterns, oyster mushrooms, no amanitas amanitas haven't popped up yet, but they will grow probably this week. The magic mushroom that's growing at the herbarium right outside there.
You would think that there'd be a lot more now, right, this time of the year, because we just had a massive rain.
Yeah.
It takes time though. Yeah, they don't just, they sometimes it seems like a rain will pop up the next day, but it's from many rains. And then
Yeah, they need a lot of
it'll
rain,
take
so
like 7 to 10 days just to warm up.
like consecutive rain, I usually give it about a week of consecutive rain, and then I go out, or sometimes 2 weeks. If you wait 2 weeks, if it's been raining every day, in 2 weeks you'll have a lot of
It's usually a
mushrooms.
couple weeks after.
Do you know if the mycology club here has forays like that?
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
Yes. I'm not sure how often they do them, but I know that
Yeah.
they do it at least
Yeah,
once a year.
Join the club, you get.
No, I don't live in this area. I joined today, but
Oh, okay. We'll let you know.
but just really to get the emails.
Right.
I might come back next week. If I do, I will let the society know. We can go foraging. I think some people forage here, but they usually do it on their own if the club isn't doing anything. But where I live, I do weekly, not weekly. I do 4 days out of the week. We go
Holy
and we
smokes.
forage.
So during the summer monsoon.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Have you found a lot of mushrooms that